Cool, thanks, that was amazing. What I want to show you, as Jen said, is quite a few of the photos that Hackney Archives have. I go there quite regularly when I can, and there's a lot of content. I mean, basically, this is what it looks like, and it's a really nice, pleasant space. Unfortunately, I think sometimes it's way too empty, but obviously you can always go. There's very sort of helpful staff. When I go to the Hackney Archives, I fixate on one of those machines, right? And I type in Stoke Newington, and this is the number of results you get back of old photos and drawings. I'm annoyed to say that most of them I don't have. So if you follow, obviously, sort of Twitter and Facebook, I upload a lot of photos, but I think there's about hundreds more that the Hackney Archives have that I don't. So this is a really great opportunity for me to kind of share with you some of those photos. I managed to calculate that this is the amount I can basically show in about 20 minutes. So I'm going to do my best, but maybe we can do a follow-on talk in the future, or maybe, like I said, you can sort of pay them a visit. When I had to kind of think about, there's so many photos, how do you pick the ones that are really interesting and really worth talking about, and what's the best way of packaging them, I ended up settling on picking photos from Church Street for a number of reasons. First of all, in terms of making sure that they're recognizable to most people, that was one aspect of it. And the other one is just to have a nice sort of theme. So we're going to basically take a stroll down Church Street from Green Lanes all the way to the fire station. And I'm going to show you how the streets has basically changed in many ways for many reasons. But before we're going to do that, since we're at sort of St Matthias Halls, I also found some photos of the old Vicarage that used to stand right there. This is what it used to look like, a fine building. This is what it looks like today. Yeah, as you can imagine, a lot of buildings were bombed. If I'm not mistaken, 472 houses in Stoke Newington were hit during the Blitz. And in many cases, new houses were built, whether it's sort of flats, council housing. A lot of churches were hit as well and rebuilt eventually. This is what it looked like after the bombing. So just to kind of have a bit of connection to where we are today. We're starting our journey on the Green Lanes end. And believe it or not, this amazing mansion was once part of Church Street. It was at the very end, just where you have sort of Green Lanes and sort of Church Street. It was called Newington Hall. It was built in 1821, it was demolished in 1875. Church Street had quite a lot of these mansions, but most of them, if not all of them, were demolished in the 1870s, where basically the inhabitants of those big mansions moved out, and these houses were replaced with these ones, right? And on the sites of each one of those large, lovely villas and townhouses, you could basically build 13 terraced houses. There's always a housing problem, right? And this is sort of side by side, right? So it was just at the end. This is a lovely drawing of that site. It's hard to imagine that this is where we live today, right? But yeah, so that's sort of Green Lanes, and that was just that. Now I wanted to kind of focus on this bit over here, and you can start seeing the New River, which is going to be the kind of the constant theme of today's sort of evening. This is a lovely map that kind of basically show the site of Newington Hall. This was the sale plan, and you can kind of think about the developer that sort of picked this up and thought, yes, I can build 20 houses on this site. Now, what I just highlighted there was Park Lane Bridge. There was also Paradise Bridge at the very top, where the New River is. And this is a photo that shows us Park Lane Bridge from what is today Clissold Crescent. So you got the park. This is the New River Cafe, if you know it. So this is looking towards Church Street. And you can still see this is the original railings of Newington Hall. This is a photo sort of slightly back. This is the entrance to Aden Terrace, where the allotments are now, right? And this is what it looks like today. Doesn't have the same impact, does it? Again, side by side, this, as I'm going to show in a minute, was the site of a huge mansion called the Willows. It basically stretched from Church Street all the way down to Albion Road. This is the view from the opposite angle, so looking down towards Clissold Crescent. It was originally called Park Lane. And you can see again the railings from the drawing. This is what it looks like today. Yeah. Now, if you start walking down Church Street from basically where Newington Hall was and where kind of Park Lane Bridge, you walk past Paradise Bridge, which you can just see there at the bottom. And this is the view looking down, looking east. So you've got the New River running along Church Street, and on the right, you're basically looking at the fine houses of Paradise Row, the most sort of affluent and picturesque part of Stoke Newington. You've got the Willows, you've got Warwick House, you've got Vincent House. You had all these large sort of houses. Most of them were basically houses to very wealthy Quaker merchants. And this was really the most sort of sought after part of Stoke Newington, overlooking the park and the river. This is what it looks like today. Right? And all those houses were demolished by the 50s. In some cases, obviously other houses were built, in some cases they were left empty. This is a front view. So this is the Willows, a massive mansion. And this is the Warwick House. And that's a New River. And if you keep walking down and you turn your head, then this is what the site looked like by the 50s. So you can see that all those houses we just looked at were completely demolished, and they were just erecting flats now. The New River is still there, and Nick is going to tell us for how long. I'm not going to spoil it. And this is a view, again, looking down Church Street. You've got the New River, you've got the kids looking down, you've got the benches. It was a very kind of striking feature of the street. We keep going down, and then we come across these lovely houses, right? These were basically sort of two pairs of semi-detached houses called Glebe Place, 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4. They were just opposite what is now the entrance to the park, right? Very nice. This is what the site looks today. It's always that sort of sigh, oh no. Right, but again, that's what happened. Stoke Newington used to be a village. You used to have these big villas, these big mansions, but times sort of changed. Whether it was in the Victorian time or sort of post-war times as well, those houses, obviously they took a lot of sort of space. There wasn't sort of the population that would actually inhabit them, and you always need more houses, more flats. London's growing. If you then keep walking down, you would basically see this lovely view. It's quite deceiving because you kind of think, where is that? That doesn't look like any sort of church street that I know. The houses that you see on the left were called Church Row. They were built on the site of the old Tudor manor house in 1695, and they were demolished to build this. There were originally 9 houses, then 8. Right? And then again, that was the most affluent, along with Paradise Row. Very big houses, but again, by the 30s, you can really find someone that can actually rent them, turning them into flats or luxurious apartments. Maybe was not an option. But when they actually demolished Church Row and were about to start building the town hall, they uncovered basically the ruins of the Tudor manor house at the bottom. And the archives, they've got about 50 photos of the excavation, which is very interesting. And then you walk down and you see this. This is really interesting. Can anyone guess? Albion Road. This is before the Rose and Crown was built there. Right? The Rose and Crown was originally on the opposite side, but when the junction was basically widened to accommodate the increasing traffic, they had to pull down the old pub and rebuild it across the street. Right? The nice thing about these photos that Jen sent me is that you can really kind of zoom in. And this was really interesting. So when you zoom in and you actually start seeing the shop, so obviously I was sort of curious to know, which shop was that. And those of you that are familiar with my work know that I've basically surveyed all the addresses on Church Street, because you can. And basically it gives you sort of direct access to all the addresses and all the occupants of all these addresses. So it's quite easy to look at 197 and see exactly, Miss E.R. Weeks confectioner from 1905 till 1925. You can see her name there on the side as well. Yeah, there she is. This is more familiar. This is the library, built in 1892, the public library on Church Street. Interesting because, again, you can see that the main entrance is actually open. At the moment, it's this sort of decaying wooden door, because obviously it was extended a number of times since it was built. We've got Church Row. But when I saw this photo, I was actually quite interested in the fact that, notice where the memorial hall is today. There was a shop. The Memorial Hall was built in 1923. You can see the name Taylor. He was a chemist. This is another photo. I really like this one because you can see the maid in Church Row. It's kind of saying, what is this guy doing with the camera? And if you wandered down that sort of main door, this is what the library used to look like. You can see the sign saying silence. Now this is one of my favorites. So if you keep walking down Church Street, so past Edwards Lane and past the post office, you basically come to this street. Does anyone recognize this street? This is Barn Street. This is one of 7 areas in Stoke Newington that were basically declared a slum clearance area. Right? Very small houses, very crowded. By the 1930s, they were basically deemed uninhabitable. They were demolished. This is what the streets look like today. Very, very different. Right? But this, if you notice, this is the street corner, so it doesn't really align with this one. Because the photo was actually taken before Denman House was built. Because Barn Street used to go all the way and connect with Lordship Terrace. I like this photo as well, because again, when you do this sort of research and you always look for clues and you look for buildings that you don't really see in any other kind of photos, and there's still a few that I always chase and look for. This one is one of the pubs that Church Street used to have, but it's long gone. This was the Falcon. And you can see it's basically right next to Nook today. You know, you've got the building next to it, Gujarat House, the flats, opposite Pronto Pizza. It used to be a really nice pub. It was there for centuries. It was rebuilt in the 19th century, but obviously only made it till 1919. But that's one of the very few photos you have of that pub. Have yet to kind of seen a nice front view of that pub. Staying with sort of pubs, this is the Red Lion on Church Street. Very different than what we know today. This is what it looks today. And I was quite annoyed when I went to the Lion originally, kind of I would say when I first moved to Stoke Newington, and you go in and you think, this is probably a very old pub. People came here with horses and so on. And then you realize it was actually built in 1924. The reason being is because Lordship Road was widened. Again, increased traffic. A lot of those roads were ancient roads, 1 lane wide, and they had to increase them. So basically, as a result, the Rosencrantz was demolished, and so was the Red Lion. So this is a side-by-side view. And you can see it was originally actually 2 separate buildings. And you can see even in the survey when those 2 buildings were basically joined up. This is a really interesting view from Lordship Road, right, that looks towards Church Street. And you can see kind of basically the old Red Lion. And you can see kind of a nice sort of building we have there. Obviously you had kind of the lockup and kind of the whipping post behind the Red Lion. But if you notice, look at the width of the road just before Church Street. It's about 1 lane wide, right? Today, it looks like that. But look at that house now, when we have the side by side. You can really see how they just sort of shaved off. You see the side of that house. It used to have another kind of window, and maybe they just basically had sort of some sort of compulsory sort of purchase. And basically just had to kind of try and somehow fit an extra lane. And like I said, as a result, the Red Lion was demolished. Right next to the Red Lion, there used to be a massive bottle depot, the wheat bread one. It was huge, right? So this is, the Red Lion is here, and this is just looking at that big entrance where now you have that. Very different. So again, the side-by-side view. And we keep walking down towards the Oakland Road. And this is the view. I love this one for many, many reasons. First of all, there's obviously a shop that's no longer a shop, if you know that sort of particular sort of building. You can see Church Street's sort of oldest pub building, the Clarence Tavern. It's not the oldest pub, but it's the oldest pub building. All the other ones were rebuilt later. This is what it looks like today. So obviously you can see a very, quite poor conversion there, right? This is the side-by-side comparison. You can see as well that the house was extended. If you look at the front door, You can see that they kind of added a whole new road there, plus the top extension. Another reason why I like this photo, because you can see the old name of the street and the old postcode. So Oakland Road was originally Park Street, and the postcode was N, up until 1917, where Stoke Newington became N16 and N4. In 1937, quite a few streets were renamed as part of a London-wide project, because you had all the old street names from the old parishes, but as London grew, they had to kind of align them. So quite a few sort of name changes. You can see that even Paradise Row became Church Street, and Newington Hall Villas. You had all these sort of small roads, and you can see at the bottom Park Street became Oakland Road. And this is the postcode map. So this is pre-1917. So before you were N16 and N4, we were just N. You can see us right there. And again, you can zoom in on this shot. You can see kind of oil color J. Smith. And here he is in the survey. And then if you zoom in, you know what the Chemist is today? It's been a chemist since ever. Really. Since 1867, it's always been a chemist. It's one of two shops on Church Street that have remained the same. The other one is Clissold Wines. It's been a wine merchant since the 1850s, continuously. Just one of those facts you find out, yeah, and you have to repeat them for no reason. The last one is another kind of mansion. This was probably the biggest mansion on sort of Church Street, 60 rooms. It was so big that eventually they had to kind of slice it into two houses. It was called Fleetwood House. It was built in 1635, and very similar to Newington Hall that we saw at the very beginning of our journey. It was also pulled down in the 1870s, and today that site looks like that. Bring back Fleetwood House. Yeah. Right. And you can see, obviously, you've got Fleetwood Street right next to it. There's a relic of that sort of fine building. And when they actually pulled down Fleetwood House, they built 13 houses on its site, 7 of which stood on the site where the fire station is now. This fire station was built in 1976. You can see the side-by-side view. Again, this was very common, but obviously by the 1860s, 1870s, the village has changed. It was becoming a very sort of bustling Victorian suburb. People sort of moved in, needed more houses, and these sort of type of 17th century mansions were no longer sort of fit for purpose. Would it be nice to see them today? Could have been a nice big cafe or a pizza restaurant. Never know, maybe one day. This is the rear elevation of Fleetwood House. We kind of merged two photos. So yeah, it's like the White House, right? It's quite amazing. You can see kind of sitting there with a bench. Another lady coming out of the door. So yeah, Fleetwood House. And that was it. I actually made it in time, which is amazing. I never make it in time. So thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed this journey. And like I said, this is just 0.85% of the photos of the Hackney archives. So hopefully this gives you a kind of a good taste of what else is there. I'm hoping to kind of maybe in the future kind of showcase more content from that sort of amazing collection. But this is pretty much it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We're going to take a 10-minute break. I'm going to put the slideshow so you can enjoy other kind of photos, and then we're going to be back with Nick. Thank you very much.